The first rays of dawn stretched across the vast savannas of the Pride Lands, painting the sky with strokes of gold, rose, and amber. The grass shimmered like liquid sunlight as a gentle breeze swept across the plains, carrying with it the songs of life, bird calls, the low hum of insects, and the distant rumble of elephants. On this glorious morning, all creatures of the Pride Lands were stirring with excitement. From the smallest meerkat to the tallest giraffe, everyone sensed that this was no ordinary day. Something extraordinary was about to happen, something that would echo through generations. At the top of Pride Rock, the great stone formation that rose above the kingdom like a throne carved by nature itself, stood King Mufasa and Queen Sarabi. Their faces were illuminated by the rising sun, their eyes filled with a pride and love that only parents could understand. In Sarabi's gentle embrace rested a small bundle of life, a newborn cub whose fur was as soft as the morning light and whose eyes, still opening to the world, gleamed faintly with curiosity and innocence. This was Simba, the future king, the heir to the great circle of life far below. The animals gathered in thousands, forming a magnificent assembly across the plains. Zebras stood in elegant lines, elephants trumpeted joyously, antelopes bowed their heads in reverence. Even the predatory beasts, hyenas lurking in the distance, lions from the neighboring lands paused in respectful silence. The Pride Lands were not merely a kingdom of power and rule. They were a living tapestry where every creature, predator and prey alike, had its place in the grand design of life. Rafiki, the wise old mandrill, approached Pride Rock with slow, deliberate steps. His fur was streaked with gray, and his face painted with the sacred colors of blue and red. Though his movements were humble, his presence commanded reverence. In his gnarled hands, he carried a gourd filled with special dust and fruit juices, symbols of life and blessing. The animals parted as he passed, whispering his name in awe. To them, Rafiki was not merely a shaman. He was the spiritual bridge between the earthly realm and the ancestral spirits that watched over the Pride Lands. Climbing to the top of Pride Rock, Rafiki bowed before Mufasa and Sarabi. The king lowered his great head, and the mandrill gently touched Simba's brow with the sacred mixture, marking him with a sign of divine blessing. The young cub let out a soft cry, a sound so pure that even the winds seemed to pause in reverence. Rafiki then lifted Simba high into the air, his small body framed perfectly against the sun's radiant glow. A wave of awe rippled through the crowd below. Trumpets of elephants echoed across the plains, birds took flight in spiraling clouds of color. The earth itself seemed to tremble with joy. From the farthest edge of the kingdom, the creatures bowed their heads as one. It was not merely a ritual, it was a moment of unity, a recognition that life continues, that hope is reborn with every generation. Mufasa stood tall behind Rafiki, his golden mane gleaming in the morning light, his expression one of pride and quiet power. He was not only the ruler of the Pride Lands but also its guardian, bound by a sacred duty to protect the balance of life. Sarabi, graceful and strong, watched her cub with eyes filled with tenderness. In her heart, she knew that the world awaiting Simba would be both beautiful and cruel, that one day he would have to understand the weight of leadership, the lessons of courage, and the meaning of sacrifice. Yet for now, he was only a cub, a spark of life beginning his journey. After the ceremony, as the animals began to return to their homes, Rafiki remained behind for a moment, gazing into the horizon where the sun met the endless plains. He whispered an ancient blessing in a language known only to the wise and the old. He saw visions in the dust and wind, visions of Simba's future, of trials and triumphs, of love and loss. A faint smile crossed his face, one touched with both joy and melancholy. He knew that every life, even one as destined as Simba's, would face the great tests of fate. But he also knew that Mufasa's teachings would guide the young cub when the time came. As the day passed, the Pride Lands basked in celebration. Birds danced in the fields, birds sang on the branches, and the rivers sparkled as if the world itself rejoiced at Simba's birth. In the heart of Pride Rock, Sarabi lay curled around her cub, her body warm and protective. Mufasa stood at the cave's entrance, his gaze sweeping over his kingdom, the rolling plains, the distant forests, the watering holes where life thrived. His heart swelled with pride, but also with the awareness of responsibility. He turned back to look at Simba, who stirred softly in his mother's embrace, a small paw stretching toward the light filtering through the cave's opening. The cub's faint roar, barely more than a squeak, echoed through the cavern, and Mufasa chuckled softly, a deep rumble of affection and amusement. That evening, as the sun sank behind the hills and the sky turned to crimson, Mufasa took Simba to the edge of Pride Rock for the first time. The stars were beginning to appear, shimmering like the eyes of the ancestors watching from above. Mufasa's voice was deep and calm as he spoke to his son, telling him that everything the light touched was their kingdom. He spoke of balance, how a true king must understand that being strong did not mean ruling by force but by respect, wisdom, and compassion. Simba listened quietly, his small golden eyes wide with wonder, though he understood little. Yet, even in his innocence, something stirred within him, a faint awareness that he was part of something vast and eternal. The night deepened, the savannah glowing under a silver moon. The stars formed ancient patterns in the sky, whispering the songs of kings long past. Mufasa's mane shimmered in the starlight as he gazed at his son, his expression filled with both pride and a silent prayer for the future. In that sacred stillness, the world seemed to hold its breath, and the wind carried with it the quiet promise of a destiny just beginning to unfold beneath the radiant glory of Pride Rock, where the golden sun caressed every blade of grass and life thrived in perfect balance. There lingered a shadow, one that did not celebrate the new heir's birth. While the Pride lands rejoiced in Simba's arrival, Scar, Mufasa's younger brother, watched from the dim confines of his den, his emerald eyes gleaming with envy and bitterness. He was a lion of cunning intellect, his mane darker than the night, his features marked by a jagged scar that ran from his eye to his muzzle, a reminder of a past struggle and the simmering resentment he carried. Scar's heart was a furnace of unspoken ambition, one that burned silently as he watched the throne slip further from his reach. Once, he had imagined himself as the rightful ruler of the Pride lands, standing tall under the sun, the animals bowing before him. But with Simba's birth, that dream had withered into a cruel joke, leaving him seething in the shadows of his brother's greatness. From his lair nestled among jagged rocks, Scar would watch Mufasa patrol the plains with the dignity of a true king, proud, strong, and noble. He despised that regal confidence, that effortless authority. Every roar of Mufasa that echoed across the land was a reminder of what he did not possess. To Scar, the world seemed unfairly tilted in his brother's favor. Mufasa had the strength, the respect of the kingdom, the loyalty of the lionesses, and now a son to secure his legacy. Scar's lip curled as he thought of the cub, that tiny creature who, without lifting a paw, had stolen the future that was rightfully his. His mind twisted with envy, and envy soon fermented into hatred. He would often speak to himself, his voice soft and silky, dripping with sarcasm. "Life's not fair, is it?" he would murmur while watching the horizon glow under the morning sun. "You see, I shall never be king, and yet you, my little nephew, are born into the golden light." His words were venom cloaked in poetry. Scar's jealousy wasn't just about power, it was about recognition. He longed to be seen, to be revered, to be something more than the forgotten brother who stood in Mufasa's shadow. One afternoon, as Mufasa came to visit his brother, the air between them was thick with tension. Mufasa's deep voice carried both authority and concern as he tried to bridge the growing distance. "Scar," he said with that regal calmness, "you missed Simba's presentation. Even the hyenas came out of hiding to see him. Is there a reason you did not?" Scar's sharp grin revealed his inner bitterness. "Oh, I feel dreadful about it, really," he said in mock sincerity, pacing slowly, his tail flicking. "Something slipped my mind. Must have been that dreadful morning sun in my eyes." His tone was laced with disdain, his words dancing between truth and insult. Mufasa's golden eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, choosing dignity over confrontation. Yet, that brief exchange only deepened Scar's resentment. Every word from his brother sounded like pity, every look like judgment. He despised it. He despised him. As days passed, Scar's thoughts grew darker. He began to wander into the desolate elephant graveyard, a forbidden land littered with bones and echoes of death. There, among the rib cages of giants long gone, he found company in those cast aside by the circle of life, the hyenas. Shensi, Bonsai, and Ed, sly and hungry, greeted him with laughter that was half crazed, half pathetic. They were creatures of hunger and mischief, desperate and dangerous. Scar saw in them what he needed, not friendship, but tools. He fed their empty bellies with promises of meat and power. "Stick with me," he whispered, his voice smooth as oil, "and you'll never go hungry again." The hyenas, naive and eager, became his loyal followers, never realizing that to Scar, they were nothing more than pawns in his rising scheme. He began to weave his plan carefully, like a spider crafting a web of deceit. He knew Mufasa's strengths, his honor, his love for his pride, and his deep affection for Simba, and Scar intended to use them against him. The young cub was curious, adventurous, and eager to prove himself. Scar saw that curiosity as the perfect bait. He began to visit Simba, speaking softly, filling the cub's mind with stories of the forbidden places, dangerous lands, and secret wonders his father forbade him to see. With feigned affection, he told Simba of the elephant graveyard, describing it as a mysterious land beyond imagination. His voice was like honey dripping over poison. Simba's eyes would widen with wonder, his heart pounding with excitement, unaware of the danger behind his uncle's gentle smile. "Promise me you'll never go there," Scar would say dramatically, lowering his head to meet Simba's gaze, knowing full well the boy's spirit would do the opposite. "It's far too dangerous for a young cub like you." And when Simba, with innocent defiance, asked what lay there, Scar's grin would widen ever so slightly. "Only the bravest lions dare go there. But of course, you're not ready for that, yet." His words were a spark to the flame of Simba's pride. Scar knew it would not be long before the cub would disobey, and when he did, the first step of his treacherous plan would be set in motion. Scar's nights were filled with whispered laughter and quiet plotting among the bones of the dead. The hyenas cackled at his cleverness, their glowing eyes reflecting the madness of his vision. He promised them the spoils of the Pride Land's endless food, no rules, no Mufasa to keep order. "When I am king," he said, standing atop a fallen elephant skull, "the hyenas shall rule beside me." His voice echoed in the hollow chambers of the graveyard, his shadow stretching long and monstrous across the bones. The hyenas roared their approval, their laughter blending with the wind like the wail of ghosts. But in the quiet after their laughter died down, Scar would sit alone, staring at the moon. Beneath his cunning exterior was a hollow emptiness, a soul consumed by envy. The moonlight glinted on his scar, the reminder of old wounds, both physical and emotional. In the stillness of the night, his thoughts turned cold, sharp, and absolute. He would have the throne, no matter the cost. Blood, betrayal, and deceit did not matter. The circle of life, the laws of nature, the love of family, all were meaningless to him now. In his mind, the Pride Lands had only room for one king, and that king would not be Mufasa, nor the cub who bore his name. The sun was high above the Pride Lands, its golden warmth spilling across the open plains where life thrived in peace and harmony. The air shimmered with heat, and the distant cry of wildebeests echoed faintly against the rocky walls of a deep gorge, a place of shadows and danger. It was here that Scar's most sinister plan was about to unfold. He had spent days calculating every detail, every whisper, every move. His mind was sharp and cold, his heart utterly void of remorse. Today was the day he would rid himself of his brother once and for all. The plan was cruelly elegant in its simplicity, used the innocent curiosity of Simba to lure Mufasa into a trap from which there could be no escape. That morning, Scar approached Simba with feigned affection, his voice as smooth as silk. "Run along, Simba," he said, his green eyes gleaming with deceit. "I've got a wonderful surprise for you. But you must promise not to tell your father." Simba's ears perked up with excitement. "A surprise?" he asked, his tail flicking eagerly. Scar leaned in close, lowering his voice into a conspiratorial whisper. "Down in the gorge. You see that big shadowy place? I want to show you something special there. Just wait on that little rock. Your father will be there soon." Simba's heart filled with anticipation. He nodded eagerly, unaware that his uncle's words were soaked in betrayal. As the cub trotted off toward the gorge, Scar turned away, his grin twisting into something dark and venomous. He made his way to the edges of the elephant graveyard, where the hyenas lay waiting among the bones, restless and hungry. The moment he appeared, their laughter filled the air like broken glass. "Is it time, boss?" Shensi hissed, her yellow eyes gleaming. Scar's voice was cold and sharp. "Yes. Do as I told you. Chase the herd, make it look like chaos. And remember," he added, his grin widening, "Mufasa must never make it out alive." In the gorge, Simba waited patiently on a small rock, the wind tugging playfully at his fur. The silence was eerie, broken only by the faint rustle of dust and the occasional chirp of distant birds. He hummed to himself, glancing around, wondering what surprise his uncle had planned. Suddenly, a low rumble began to grow beneath his paws, faint at first, then louder, deeper, until the ground began to shake violently. The air filled with thunderous noise, and Simba's eyes widened in horror. From the mouth of the gorge, a massive herd of wildebeests came thundering down, their hooves pounding like war drums, their eyes wild with fear. Panicked, Simba scrambled to his feet, darting across the rocks as dust and debris filled the air. He called out for help, his small voice lost in the chaos. The herd stormed around him, a living wall of terror and dust. From above, Scar watched from the edge of the gorge, his smile cruel and unflinching. When the moment was perfect, he turned and raced toward Pride Rock. "Stampede!" he shouted breathlessly to Mufasa. "Simba's down there." The words tore through the air like a blade, and Mufasa's heart froze. Without hesitation, he leapt into action, his powerful legs carrying him with lightning speed toward the gorge. The scene below was chaos incarnate, a swirling sea of wildebeests, dust rising in suffocating clouds. And somewhere in that storm of hooves and fear was his son. With a mighty roar that shook the air, Mufasa plunged into the heart of the stampede. His mane whipped in the wind, his muscles straining as he fought against the torrent of beasts. His eyes searched desperately until, through the blur of motion, he spotted a small figure clinging to a tree branch jutting out from the side of the gorge. "Simba!" he roared, his voice echoing above the thunder of hooves. The cub's terrified eyes met his father's, and hope flickered in his heart. Summoning all his strength, Mufasa surged forward, dodging and leaping between the stampeding animals. The earth trembled beneath him as he reached the ledge and caught Simba, pushing him up onto a rocky slope where he would be safe. "Hold on tight," Mufasa growled, his voice strained but firm. Simba scrambled up to safety, his body trembling. But when Mufasa tried to climb after him, the slope gave way, and he slipped back into the chaos below. With a desperate roar, he leapt upward again, claws scraping against the jagged rock, hooves thundering around him, dust choking his lungs. Finally, he reached the cliff's edge and clung to it, his claws digging deep into the rock surface. Above him stood Scar. "Brother!" Mufasa gasped, his voice raw and desperate. "Help me!" His golden eyes met Scar's, full of trust and fear. For a moment, Scar merely stared down at him, his expression unreadable. Then his lips curled into that terrible, mocking smile. "Long live the king," he whispered, his voice a venomous hiss. With a swift motion, Scar sank his claws into Mufasa's paws and threw him backward into the churning stampede below. The sound of Mufasa's roar echoed once more, a deep, haunting cry that faded into silence as his body disappeared into the cloud of dust and chaos. The world seemed to stand still. The herd began to thin and slow, the thunder of hooves fading into distant echoes. Simba, trembling, ran down from the rocks, calling out desperately. "Dad?" His small voice broke through the settling dust. "Dad?" He stumbled through the gorge, his paws trembling, his heart pounding with dread. And then he saw him, Mufasa's great body lying motionless on the dry earth, the dust settling around him like a shroud. The cub approached slowly, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Dad?" he whispered again, pressing his small head against his father's mane. There was no response. The air was silent now, heavy and still, as the truth settled like a weight on Simba's heart. Scar descended from the cliffs, his shadow stretching long and dark across the ground. He spoke softly, his tone dripping with false sorrow. "Simba, what have you done?" The words pierced the cub's heart like a blade. Tears welled in his eyes as he shook his head frantically. "It was an accident," he stammered, his voice breaking. "I didn't mean to." Scar placed a paw on his shoulder, the gesture deceptively gentle. "Of course you didn't," he said smoothly, "but the others won't understand. What will your mother think?" Simba's breath caught, his fear overwhelming him. "Run away, Simba," Scar whispered, his eyes gleaming. "Run away and never return." The cub's heart shattered under the weight of guilt and confusion. With tears streaming down his face, Simba turned and fled into the wastelands beyond the Pride Lands, his small body vanishing into the dust and distance, while behind him, Scar turned his gaze toward the horizon where the sun began to sink. The light dimmed over the gorge, and the shadows grew longer, swallowing the land in darkness as the king's lifeless body lay still beneath the fading sky. The desert stretched endlessly before Simba, a barren ocean of golden sand and blistering heat. The cub's paws ached, his throat burned, and his heart was heavy with despair. The memory of his father's fall haunted every step he took, echoing in his mind like a cruel whisper he could never silence. Scar's voice, cold and accusing, rang within him. "What have you done?" He had run, as his uncle told him to, driven by guilt, fear, and heartbreak. The Pride Lands were far behind now, and all that remained before him was desolation. The sun beat down mercilessly, his small body stumbling under its weight. His fur, once golden and bright, was matted with dust. His young eyes, once full of wonder, were dimmed by sorrow. Eventually, his legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the sand, too weak to rise. The world around him blurred, fading into a haze of heat and silence. Buzzards circled above, their dark shapes cutting across the sky, waiting for the small, motionless body below to surrender to death. But fate had other plans for the lost cub. From a nearby dune came the sound of laughter, high-pitched, easy, and oddly carefree. Two unlikely figures approached, a meerkat with quick eyes and a warthog with a clumsy gait. Timon and Pumbaa were wanderers of the wild, bound by friendship and a shared philosophy that life was too short for worries. When they saw the cub lying still, Pumbaa gasped, his voice full of concern. "Hey, Timon, look. It's a lion." Timon froze, his tail stiffening in alarm. "Are you crazy? Lions eat guys like us." But Pumbaa, whose heart was far larger than his brain, edged closer. "But he's so little," he said softly. "Maybe he's just a cub. Maybe he needs help." Despite his protests, Timon followed, and together they nudged the unconscious cub. When Simba stirred faintly, Timon frowned. "Kid's alive. Poor guy looks like he's been through the ringer." Pumbaa smiled. "We can take him in, Timon. Raise him as our own." The meerkat rolled his eyes. "Oh sure, why not adopt a lion? What could possibly go wrong?" But even as he spoke, something in Simba's fragile state stirred a rare compassion in him. Together, they lifted the cub and carried him away from the burning desert, toward a place hidden deep within the jungle, a paradise untouched by worry or sorrow. When Simba awoke, he was surrounded by greenery unlike anything he had ever seen. Tall trees reached for the heavens, vines hung lazily in the humid air, and the sound of rushing water filled his ears. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting golden flecks upon the ground. Pumbaa grinned widely as the cub opened his eyes. "Hey, sleepyhead," he said cheerfully. "Welcome to your new home." Simba blinked, dazed. Where am I?" Timon jumped onto a rock beside him, puffing out his chest. "Kid, you're in paradise. The great beyond. The land of no worries. Hakuna Matata." The phrase rolled off Timon's tongue like a secret spell. "Hakuna Matata," he said again, savoring the sound. "It means no worries. It's our motto." Pumbaa nodded proudly. "Yeah. It means you leave your past behind you. Forget about your troubles. Just live for today." Simba frowned, his mind still clouded by pain. "But I can't just forget." Timon waved a paw dismissively. "Sure you can. Look, kid, bad stuff happens, right? You can either spend your life crying over it, or you can learn to eat bugs and enjoy the view." Pumbaa chuckled. "They're not so bad once you get used to them." At first, Simba was confused, even disgusted, as they introduced him to their unusual diet, slimy grubs and crunchy beetles. But as days passed, the jungle began to weave its magic around him. The air was filled with laughter, the nights alive with song. Timon and Pumbaa became his family, teaching him the ways of their simple, carefree life. They swam in rivers, lounged beneath waterfalls, and feasted under the stars. Whenever Simba's thoughts drifted back to his past, Timon would nudge him with a grin. "Hakuna Matata, kid. The past is in the past." And slowly, like a wound scabbing over, his pain began to dull. Seasons changed, and so did Simba. The frail cub grew into a strong, golden-maned lion. The jungle became his kingdom of exile, a place where time lost its meaning. He ran with the wind, his laughter echoing through the trees, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Yet, beneath the surface of his new life, the past still lingered. Sometimes, when the moon rose high and the night was quiet, Simba would wander alone to the cliffs overlooking the jungle. He would stare into the distance, where the stars shimmered like scattered diamonds, and a familiar ache would grip his chest. In the whispers of the night breeze, he almost thought he could hear his father's voice. Pumbaa would sometimes find him there, gazing silently at the heavens. "You okay, Simba?" he'd ask gently. Simba would force a smile. "Yeah. I'm fine. Hakuna Matata, right?" But even as he said the words, they rang hollow. The philosophy that had saved him from despair had also built walls around his heart. He had learned to laugh, to lie, to forget but not to heal. The memory of Mufasa still lived within him, buried deep, waiting for the day it would no longer be ignored. One afternoon, while wandering near the jungle's edge, Simba chased after a butterfly that fluttered in the sunlight. As he ran, he crossed a shallow stream and came face to face with his own reflection. For the first time, he saw not a carefree lion, but a king's image staring back at him. His golden mane gleamed under the sun, his eyes carrying the same strength that once lived in his father's gaze. A chill ran through him as he realized how much he resembled Mufasa. For a long moment, he stood there, frozen, memories flooding back his father's deep voice, the feel of his paw on his shoulder, the words about the circle of life. Timon's laughter echoed from behind. "Hey, Simba. Quit daydreaming and come on, the grubs are fresh today." Simba blinked, shaking himself from the trance. He turned away from the water and followed, but the reflection lingered in his mind. The jungle still sang its song of freedom and laughter, but beneath it all, something restless began to stir inside him, a faint whisper of destiny, a call from a past he thought he had buried forever, a reminder that no matter how far he ran, the circle of life always found its way back. The sun poured through the emerald canopy of the jungle, scattering golden light upon the forest floor where life hung in carefree harmony. Birds called out from the treetops, and the river sang its endless melody through moss-covered stones. Simba lay lazily on a smooth boulder near a waterfall, the air heavy with the scent of fruit and rain. Beside him, Timon and Pumbaa argued over who had eaten the last beetle, their laughter echoing across the glade. It was another day of peace, another day of Hakuna Matata, the life he had come to know and accept. To anyone watching, Simba was the image of contentment, a lion who had found his paradise. Yet deep within, beneath the laughter and light, something in him remained unsettled. There were moments, brief but piercing, when the sound of rushing water reminded him of a voice long gone, deep, wise, and full of love. He would shake the thought away, convincing himself that the past was dead, that the old life and all its pain were buried beneath the vines of time. But destiny has a way of finding those who run from it. Far beyond the jungle, the Pride Lands had changed. Once green and thriving under Mufasa's reign, the kingdom had withered under Scar's rule. The grass was brittle, the rivers dry, and the skies hung heavy with smoke. The hyenas roamed freely, devouring without restraint, while the lionesses hunted endlessly but found little. Among them was Nala, grown now into a fierce and graceful lioness. Her eyes, once bright with wonder, now carried the shadows of hardship. She had watched her home crumble, her pride grow thin, and her queen Sarabi refused to yield to despair. When the suffering became unbearable, Nala made a decision that would change everything. She would leave the Pride Lands, cross the borders, and seek help. No matter how far she had to go, her journey was long and perilous. She traveled through barren wastelands and dense forests, fought hunger and exhaustion, and evaded dangers that lurked in every shadow. Yet the memory of her home, of her mother, her pride, and the golden kingdom that once shone under the sun kept her going. One day, after following the scent of water, she reached the lush jungle that lay hidden like a jewel amidst the wilderness. The air here was alive again, vibrant, full of color and sound. She had never seen anything like it. And there, by chance or fate, her path crossed with an unlikely pair, a meerkat and a warthog, who were cheerfully singing under the waterfall, their voices echoing with joy. Startled, Nala crouched low, watching them. They were unlike any creature she had met, foolish yet harmless. But then, a familiar scent caught her attention, faint, but undeniable. She froze, her heart racing. It couldn't be. She followed it quietly through the vines until she emerged into a sunlit clearing, and there he was. Simba. The cub she had grown up with, the friend she had thought lost forever. Only now he was no cub. His mane was full and golden, his body strong, his eyes older but still carrying that glimmer of warmth she remembered. For a moment, she could only stare, breathless with disbelief. Simba turned at the sound of movement, his playful expression fading into stunned silence as his gaze met hers. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stand still. "Nala," he whispered, his voice trembling with recognition. She took a cautious step forward, her eyes soft yet questioning. "It is you," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "You're alive." And before either of them could speak further, they leapt toward one another, their reunion a mixture of shock, joy, and tears. Timon and Pumbaa watched from the side, utterly bewildered. Hold on, Timon muttered. "You know her?" Simba laughed nervously. Yeah. This is Nala. My friend." But the joy of reunion soon gave way to the weight of reality. As they talked, Nala's face darkened. She told him of Scar's rule, of how the Pride Lands had fallen into ruin. "There's no food, no water," she said, her voice tight with sorrow. "Scars destroy everything. The hyenas eat whatever they want, and we're starving." Her eyes searched his, desperate. "We need you, Simba. You have to come back." Her words struck him like a blow. For a moment, he couldn't speak. The old pain, the memory of that fateful day in the gorge came rushing back. His heart clenched with guilt and fear. "I can't go back," he said finally, turning away. "You wouldn't understand." Nala's expression hardened. "Wouldn't understand? Your father died, and so did ours, all of them, under Scar. And you're just hiding here?" Her voice trembled between anger and heartbreak. "You're letting him destroy everything you were meant to protect." Simba's head bowed, his mane falling across his eyes. "It's not that simple," he muttered. "You don't know what I've done." Nala stepped closer, her voice softening. "Whatever it is, it's in the past. Mufasa would be ashamed to see you like this." The name cut through him like lightning. He flinched, pain flashing across his face. "Don't you dare mention him," he roared, his voice echoing through the jungle. The outburst left a heavy silence between them, and Nala's eyes filled with tears. "You're not the Simba I knew," she whispered before turning away. That night, Simba wandered alone under the stars, the weight of her words pressing on his heart. The jungle felt colder now, the laughter of Timon and Pumbaa distant and hollow. He walked until he reached a still pool of water and gazed into it, his reflection shimmering in the moonlight. "Who are you?" he whispered. The wind stirred the leaves, and for a moment, he thought he heard his father's voice, faint, deep, and filled with love. "Remember who you are." He looked up sharply, his breath catching. The clouds above began to shift, and in their formation, the image of Mufasa appeared vast and glowing, his mane swirling with starlight. "Simba," the voice said, soft yet commanding. "You have forgotten me because you have forgotten who you are. You are more than what you have become. You are my son, and the one true king." Simba's heart trembled as tears filled his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I thought I could escape it, but I can't." The vision faded, but the echo of Mufasa's words lingered in the night air. "Remember who you are." Simba fell to his knees, the weight of truth settling upon him. For the first time in years, he felt the strength of his father's spirit not as a memory, but as a living flame within him. When dawn broke, Simba climbed to the highest rock in the jungle and looked out toward the horizon. The Pride Lands lay beyond those hills, waiting, dying, calling. The air was cool, the wind stirring his mane as if whispering the name he had long tried to forget. Somewhere deep within, the cub who had once run from his destiny began to stir again, and the lion he was meant to become awoke. The sky was painted in shades of crimson and violet as Simba stood upon the edge of the jungle, the wind stirring through his mane like the whisper of destiny itself. The call of his homeland echoed faintly across the vast plains that stretched before him, and in his heart, the words of his father lingered. "Remember who you are." Those words had burned away the fog of fear that had held him prisoner for so long. He was no longer the cub who had run from his past. He was the son of Mufasa, the rightful heir to the Pride Lands. As dawn broke, he turned to Timon, Pumbaa, and Nala, his eyes filled with quiet determination. "I have to go back," he said. His voice carried a strength they had never heard before. Timon looked at him in disbelief. "Go back? You mean, to that place? With your crazy uncle and his hyena army?" Pumbaa blinked nervously, but Nala's eyes glowed with pride. "He's right," she said softly. "He's ready." The journey back was long and silent, the air growing drier and heavier as they neared the borders of the once great kingdom. The land that had once thrived under Mufasa's reign was now a wasteland of ash and bone. The rivers were nothing but cracked earth, the grass reduced to brittle husks, and the sky hung heavy with smoke. The scent of decay filled the air, and the roars of scavengers echoed from distant cliffs. Simba's heart ached at the sight. This was my home," he murmured, his voice trembling with grief. Nala walked beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Scars destroyed everything," she said quietly. "But it's not too late." They climbed the final ridge that led to Pride Rock, and there it stood dark and broken, its once proud silhouette now a shadow against the stormy sky. Lightning flickered in the distance, casting eerie flashes of light upon the hyenas that prowled at its base. The air was heavy with the stench of death and fear. At the top, Scar's figure stood like a ghost king, his mane unkempt, his eyes burning with cruelty. He had grown thinner, his arrogance feeding on what little remained of the land. Around him, the lionesses moved with weariness, their bodies thin and tired. Sarabi, proud even in her suffering, stood at the edge of the rock, her eyes defiant as Scar berated her. "Why have you refused to hunt?" Scar's voice cracked like thunder. "The hyenas are starving, and you do nothing." Sarabi lifted her head, her tone calm but strong. There is nothing left, Scar. You've destroyed everything. The king's face twisted in fury, and he struck her across the muzzle. I am the king. He roared. His voice echoed across the barren plain. You will obey me. Before he could strike again, a voice broke through the storm, deep, powerful, and unmistakably familiar. No, Scar. The word rolled like thunder. All eyes turned as Simba emerged from the shadows, lightning illuminating his golden mane. For a heartbeat, the entire Pride Rock seemed to hold its breath. Sarabi gasped, her eyes filling with tears. Mufasa? She whispered. Then, realization struck, and her voice softened. No, it can't be. Simba? Scar's face froze in disbelief, but only for a moment. Then a cruel smile crept across his lips. Well, the ghost returns, he said mockingly. How touching. He began to circle Simba, his voice dripping with venom. I see you've come back. But this is my kingdom now. Step down, Scar, Simba growled, his voice firm. You don't deserve to rule. The hyenas snickered in the shadows, their laughter shrill and nervous. Scar tilted his head, pretending to sigh. Oh, Simba, he said softly. You must understand the truth is painful. You wouldn't want everyone to know what really happened that day in the gorge, would you? Simba froze, his heart pounding. Scar's eyes glinted with malice. Tell them, Simba. Tell them who was responsible for Mufasa's death. The pride turned to Simba, their eyes wide, waiting. The truth he had buried for years rose like fire in his throat. It was me, he said quietly. I killed Mufasa. Gasps rippled through the lionesses, and Sarabi stepped back in horror. Scar grinned wickedly. Ah, so you admit it. He leaned close, his breath hot and cruel. But there's something you don't know. It wasn't your fault, Simba. He paused, his smile growing darker. It was mine. The words hung in the air like poison. Before Simba could react, Scar struck, his claws raking across Simba's face, sending him tumbling backward toward the edge of Pride Rock. The storm raged, rain beginning to fall in sheets as Scar pinned Simba to the cliff's edge, his claws digging deep. Now, this looks familiar, doesn't it? He hissed. This is just the way your father looked before he died. Lightning flashed again, illuminating Scar's snarl. And here's my little secret, I killed Mufasa. The words ignited something deep within Simba, something that had lain dormant for too long. Rage, grief, and love fused into a single, roaring force. With a powerful surge, Simba clawed his way up, his strength returning like a tide. No. He roared, his voice echoing across the cliffs. Murderer. With one mighty shove, he hurled Scar backward, the two lions clashing in a storm of fury and lightning. Sparks flew as claws met claws, teeth met teeth. The hyenas watched from below as thunder crashed overhead. Scar tried to flee, but Simba pursued him up the peak of Pride Rock. The battle was brutal, the past itself tearing at the present. Finally, Scar fell to his knees, begging for mercy. Simba, I am family, he gasped. The hyenas, it was their fault. I was forced to act. Simba stood over him, his chest heaving, rain running down his mane. Run, he said coldly. Run away, Scar. Run away and never return. Scar's eyes flickered with false submission, but as Simba turned away, he lunged once more. The motion was quick, desperate, but Simba was ready. With a single move, he caught Scar's strike and flung him over the edge. Scar's scream echoed through the storm as he fell into the pit below, where the hyenas waited. Their laughter rose in the darkness, a chilling chorus that drowned out his final cry. The storm broke, and the rain began to wash away the ashes of the past. Simba climbed to the peak of Pride Rock, the wind howling around him. The pride gathered below, their eyes filled with hope and reverence. Lightning flashed one last time as Simba stood tall, his mane gleaming in the rain. He raised his head to the heavens and let out a roar that thundered across the land, a sound that carried strength, renewal, and the return of a king. The clouds began to part, sunlight spilling over the Pride lands once more, igniting the earth with warmth and color. The rivers began to flow again, the grass turning green beneath the first rays of dawn, and the circle of life began anew.